Hello. Can you believe it? Beautiful day. God has given us a beautiful day. Eat your vegetables. I know it's how millions of sermons get started, right? Eat your vegetables. I don't know. I mean, you've likely been on the receiving end of that at some point in your life, and probably as a kid. Hopefully it's not your spouse that's having to tell you that. But you've been on the receiving of that thought, that premise in some form. And if you are a parent, you have probably likely doled out some form of that comment. Maybe it's more like 2 more bites of your green beans and you could have some pudding or strawberry shortcake or whatever it is. I remember with my kids it was always, can I be done? And usually if there was any dessert, getting done was something that needed to be done because they were more excited about the dessert than they were the meal, obviously. So it's usually something more like that. You just eat a couple more bites and you can have X, Y, Z, whatever it is. But it's about diet balancing, right? Well, maybe it's diet balancing, or maybe it's that drunk on power thing that comes with parenting. Yeah, we know how intoxicating that can be. But preacher, you've already gotten off topic. This is the first day of unleavened bread, and you just got started. You're already off into the wrong food group. I don't even know, is food group still a thing in schools today? I don't hear the kids talking about it. I know when we were in school, in elementary school especially, we had you remember the little triangle with the bottles of milk, which that tells you how old that thought was, and the buns or whatever it was, and the little maybe that's the problem. It was a triangle. Maybe they determined that it was a pyramid scheme cooked up by farmers to make you eat more vegetables. I don't know, but anyway, somewhere along the way, it got determined that the human body does what it does its functioning more efficiently. Is efficiently the word? Anyway, the human body does what it's supposed to do better when it is fueled with plant matter, okay? And maybe it was in the Garden of Eden, I don't know. God did say, from any tree of the garden you may surely or freely eat, depending on the translation. From any tree of the garden you may surely or freely eat. Now, technically, that's an endorsement for fruit and maybe nuts, but not vegetables. Now, let me give full disclosure here. This is coming from a lover of vegetables, right? I can't think, at least of the ones that I've had. I don't know that I've had every vegetable in the world, but there's not many vegetables that I don't like. So I'm not knocking vegetables, and I'm not knocking, nuts and fruits either. But besides maybe leeks and onions, vegetables are underrepresented in the Bible. Oh, but those dates and figs and raisins. Yeah, well, the pomegranates. Don't forget about the pomegranate. So even when the instructions came out for the temple, right, if you read that and on the different bowls and the candlesticks and all these different engravings that goes around them, you see about the engravings of the nut trees or the nut blossoms or the almond whatever, and the pomegranate, all these you don't read about bean sprouts or broccoli. It didn't say don't engrave those in gold around the temple fixtures. Yeah, they're underrated, I guess, but surely I jest. I love most fruit too, even figs and pomegranates. Maybe all the ones that I've had. So, as long as watermelon isn't a fruit, which I guess technically watermelon can't be a fruit because it grows on the vine on the ground. So, anyway, maybe I'm not the only one amused by the dietary habits in God's wonderful creations. I mean, even with the dinosaurs, there were herbivores and there were carnivores, right? There were dinosaurs that ate only vegetables or plants, and then ones that were meat eaters. That's part of the amusement, though. That's part of the amusement for me, because nature seems to fly in the face of what they tell us works best in humans. You need more fruits and vegetables, less meat, right? That's what if we're going to be healthy, we're going to live long. God says, honor your mother and father if you want to live long on the earth. So does that trump your diet? I just got to be good to mom and dad. I can eat whatever I want to. God says your days will be long on earth. He doesn't say what form of days those will be. But anyway, again, I jest. But nature does seem to fly in the face of what they tell us works best. Less meat, more fruits and vegetables. Of course, then there are some diets. I know Weight Watchers years ago, said not to eat too much fruit, or at least certain kinds of fruit. They kind of frowned on bananas, and Linda could have told you that inside and out and sideways. I heard it a million times. But, some diets tell you maybe you shouldn't have because of the sugar that's in them. And I think, wait a minute, the sugar that's in fruit, that's God-made sugar. So anyway, but I'm not a dietitian, as you can tell. Looking up here, I'm not a dietitian. Or at least I'm not a very diligent. I don't obey much if I know anything about diet. So we have a guy at a house that we bought recently. He came yesterday, set out his traps. We're trying to catch a groundhog. Or groundhogs. We don't know how many they are. We know there's a tunnel. We know that it's in an undesirable place. We know how destructive they can be. I've only seen one, and I asked him yesterday, I said, is there any chance, because the same day they cut this hedge here, we were having some trees removed at that house. There were like 12 of them, I believe. Not only did we have the trees removed, but we had the stumps ground. And this was right over or around where we think the groundhog tunnel is. And I haven't seen him since then. But I'm not there all the time, so the groundhogs have had plenty of opportunity to be out. I said, is there any chance that would have stressed the groundhogs out enough that they moved? Well, I won't say it's impossible. It's unlikely because groundhogs are really stubborn. But I've had a few standoffs with at least this one groundhog. It looks like the same one that I keep seeing. And there's some humor in that, and I've told the story to a few people in here, so I won't repeat it. But they're funny to watch because I've got to see up close and personal just by looking out the windows a groundhog in its natural habitat and their eating habits, and they're so funny because there's this certain thing that grows in and around some old flower beds that are there. It's a leafy, it's some kind of greens to him. It is green, but to her or him, I don't know which it is, but to watch them stand up, and they got this long sprout of whatever it is he's cut off, and it's almost like a cartoon. The jaws, and this thing just keeps getting shorter and shorter. Yeah. And they stand up and they hold their hands together, or sometimes they hold their foot. It's funny to watch. I hate to disturb, but the point is, this groundhog or groundhogs, they are, for the most part, as I understand, herbivores. They don't eat anything that isn't vegetable or grass or weeds or whatever. But they are trying to catch this groundhog, and it's if this thing is vegetarian. And then to know, when they first come out of hibernation, this one looks a little light and scruffy. Because I've seen some groundhogs. It looks like they're as wide as this thing right here. And he said, yeah, well, groundhogs do look kind of menacing, but once you get them and you get them caged, they're not as big as they look, but they are very dangerous. They can put a hurt on you. So, but this one looks kind of scruffy. But when you see groundhogs in the fall, they are dark and slick and fat. Did you hear that? They're fat. They're vegetarians and they're fat, okay? Again, nature seems to fly in the face of, now, if you eat your own weight, that's the problem. It's not that I don't eat enough salad. I guess I eat, but when I do, maybe it's a whale's portion of salad. I don't know. But anyway, but he'd be fat and slick. But then I think about cats. Cats out in the wild especially, they live on meat. You don't see cats eating vegetables. You don't see, now I've seen cats eat grass to try to make themselves sick if something's not agreeing with them, but yeah, cats in the wild, they're not fat. Muscle, yes. In my opinion, cat is not much more than muscle, especially cats in the wild. They live on meat. Again, they chew grass to get sick, but isn't lean muscle, and this is where Chris could come in, isn't lean muscle better for your metabolism? Doesn't lean muscle burn more calories than fat? That's what I've understood anyway. But yeah, it's better for your metabolism. It burns more energy. Now, again, you look out here, and I drive past them every day. Pastures full. Cows, goats, sheep, and they're eating salad all day. Maybe you give them some grain. That's like putting granola on your salad, right? But, skinny cow might be a brand, but it's not a reality, at least not where I'm from. You see, these cows get massive, and they're eating grass. You know what I mean? But they're making that meat so we can eat, right? Yeah, it's something. And as much as I like fruits and vegetables, I'm always going to be, or at least I say I'm always going to be, pro-meat. It's a good thing this isn't a Day of Atonement message, isn't it? Y'all beating the bark off of this podium up here. Talking about all these fruits and vegetables and salads and meats and, yeah. Well, I have to admit it hasn't sounded much like a First Day of Unleavened Bread message either, has it? Eat your vegetables. Healthy dietary balance. Why? What's that about? What is a healthy dietary balance about? It's about living as long as we can in as good a health as we can manage, right? I don't think anybody, it's like the old song, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. So when we think about our dietary balance and we think maybe I'm eating too much red meat, for me it's I'm eating too many French fries or potato chips or those things that they tell you are bad for you, and I'm not arguing with it, I'm not a dietitian. But one of the goals is not only do we want to live as long as we can, but we don't want to live all that long if we're going to be in misery. So we try to, at least occasionally, take thought for those kind of things, don't we? Living as long as we can in as good a health as we can manage. It's a little piece of control, or sometimes not. But it is something that we can control even if we choose not to, right? It's that little bit of control we have over what happens in our physical bodies. There's so many things out there. We went through a pandemic. We have all these different things that can happen to us, and hearts and arteries and joints and circulatory systems and digestive systems and all these different things that can happen that and maybe our diet, if we're really strict with it, maybe we can control some of those things, but it's still, life is a lottery, isn't it? We just don't know what's genetic, what's in our environment. So we still have those concerns. But it's when it comes to a balanced diet, it's a little bit of control over things that aren't really in control. And in reality, what are our physical bodies for? Our physical bodies are the vehicles for our brains. Our physical bodies gather food for our brain. It contracts or collects data and info for the brain. That's what this physical body does. It supports the brain. You carry your sorry sack of bones to a concert or a theater or whatever it is to entertain, right? Or you carry yourself to a restaurant to have a good meal and practice that balanced diet. I'm going to have a lot of salad, maybe a little fruit, and a little bit of meat. Yeah, that's the way we look at the menu. So perhaps all health can be considered mental health. I don't know. That's maybe a topic for another day. Beginning today, these physical bodies and brains start undergoing an annual nourishment realignment. In Romans 12 we see, and it's in verse 2, and do not be conformed to this world. Go to church on a Thursday, if I tell you to. Do not be conformed to this world, but be you transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may approve what the will of God is, that which is good and pleasing and perfect. Now, that's probably from a Legacy Standard Bible, so the King James may read a little bit different. I have a King James in front of me, but I wrote down some of these scriptures out of some other translations. But I think the meaning is undeniable. Be you transformed by the renewing of your mind. I do not think that is a one and done. I don't think that's something you do at conversion. I've transformed my thinking. I've renewed my mind, so I'm all set. You know, we have to have at least an annual realignment. Even a chiropractor will tell you that. If you'd come once a year and get adjusted, you wouldn't have these you wouldn't have these problems. It's not one and done. You know, I think back to quality auditing, and sometimes with a little anxiety because it was always an anxious thing. Back in the day when I was, working in the automotive industry, and not that they don't have quality auditing in other places, but in the automotive industry it was a beast. And to receive or to maintain certification, you had to have an outside entity whenever you came due. I don't think it was once a year, but at least once every couple of years. Maybe it was 3 years. You have to have an outside entity come in and make sure that you're doing what your procedures say that you're doing, and that you're doing it accurately and with diligence. And even though those outside audits weren't all the time, just about all the time, we were practicing. If you were part of the quality auditing process, we practiced for this in-house, so we would be ready whenever that time came. So, and I don't mean to bore you, but I do have a point. In measurement, and it's not necessarily the parts that you make, because the parts that we made, you had to put on a CAD drawing or a Mylar to make sure it fit the drawing, right? If it didn't, if it was so far out on either edge, or the holes weren't in the right place, or the cutouts weren't in the right place, then it had to be tossed, right? So there's not much you can do there as far as, obviously you got to adjust your machine so the parts are right. But anything that measures, whether it's a Strom machine that tests its tensile strength, or if it's just like our blend line had scales, and it dumped so much of each kind of material in as it went down this conveyor so that when it got to the mixer, it was all as it was supposed to be. But if you've got anything that measures, counts, or weighs, then one of the first questions you might get in an outside audit, or even in an internal audit, show me the documentation for your calibration schedule. Because if you've got things that are taking weights and measurements, or whatever, you need to have those things calibrated. Like I said, if it counts, measures, weighs, you need to show diligence in certifying its accuracy. It's why customers require their vendors to be QS or ISO certified, so that they can depend on the consistency of your product. And if your scales aren't calibrated, or your whatever isn't working, then there's going to be inconsistency in the parts, right? So that's why they ask you to do that. Now, it's easy for me to imagine that the Passover and the days of unleavened bread, it's easier for me to imagine those things as an annual calibration. It's making sure things are right. Maybe they won't be right 3 months from now as right as they are now. But rather, we have once a year to go through the Passover and the days of unleavened bread to get back in line, don't we? Now, not that we don't do that throughout the year, but this is real time. 1 Corinthians 5:8 says, "Therefore let us celebrate the feast." It's not talking about the Feast of Tabernacles in this schedule. In this scripture. "Therefore let us celebrate the feast, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of," can you complete that sentence if you're not looking at your Bible? "Sincerity and truth." So I'm not going to send around a petition for you to sign that says, let's change this from the days of unleavened bread to the days of sincerity and truth. And it's not sincerity and truth necessarily. What I'm talking about today is from the people that's looking at you from outside. I'm talking about sincerity and truth from yourself, from the inside out. And you can even lie to yourself. But good luck lying to God and trying to make Him think that we're something we're not. He said, let us, now we don't, maybe some of you do. I can't speak for everybody. It doesn't appear from my perspective that we celebrate as much during the days of unleavened bread as we celebrate during the Feast of Tabernacles. We don't look for the days of unleavened bread with anticipation. Well, we do, but not with the same anticipation that we look at packing up and going somewhere and staying at a resort or something for 8 or 9 days. But the Scripture says, let us celebrate. And let's not do it with the old leaven. In other words, it's a new attitude, isn't it? All that stuff that we've been waiting around in all year. Let us celebrate the days of unleavened bread with some new bread. The unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So what you're looking at is the first day of 7 days of sincerity and truth. Makes it a, well, now I really don't want to celebrate. By description, it is a calibration. Are the things that are weighing and measuring accurate? Are they reliable? 7 days of sincerity and truth. You could put a tagline on that, no fudging in your judging. There you go, some more food. I hate fudge. I wish. You know, I remember, and this is, well, I'm not going to say it doesn't apply to the females in the room because maybe you did. And I don't know that every male in the room did. When I was a kid, they didn't have all the stuff that they have now, obviously. But they had some pretty good stuff. And I remember being fascinated, and I still like racing to this day. But the little tracks that you put together, the little sections of track had the 2 little metal things in it, and you snap them together, and you had the little yellow guardrails that you could affix to the side of the track, and you had these little slot cars, and you put them in there. And you try to learn how to squeeze that trigger just the right way to go fast enough, but yet keep your car on the track. So more often than not, my car was rolling across the living room floor. But I loved it. I loved putting them together in different formations, seeing what you could do to maybe modify your race car. Wasn't much you could do. The car's this big. Couldn't even get under the hood for crying out loud. Yeah, it's like yesterday. I can see how those pieces of track go together. Yeah. Now, you could also cheat a little bit. Because you could take your car, you could take you a strip of duct tape, turn it over to its business side, and roll your car across that sticky a little bit. Put it back on the track, and you've got some in-the-curve traction. You've got some stick-in-the-curve traction right there. But the downside of it was it probably slowed you down a little bit, too. That was before the days of downforce and the big spoiler on the back, so you run your car across some duct tape to give it a little more traction so it would stay on the track. I can go just a little bit faster, but those triggers were something else. You just wanted to squeeze it because especially if somebody was about to pass you. Yeah, anyway, that's enough of a flashback, I guess. Yeah. I mentioned the Garden of Eden a little bit ago. Even the sons of Adam and Eve, or at least the first 2 that we read about, there was a meat guy and a plant guy. And they both made offerings. But the plant guy maybe didn't get it, the agricultural guy, the one that had the fruits and vegetables or whatever. I don't think maybe he brought the best that he had. And the meat guy did. I don't know exactly. I'd have to study back into that to see why God didn't have favor with the other offering. But anyway, it made him upset. But in that story, there is also a real, in my opinion, a real example of sincerity and truth. It's in Genesis chapter 4, and I'm going to read the first 7 verses. Now, I'm not trying to give you heavy homework for the days of unleavened bread. But this is real. Well, some people may tell you it's made up, but I don't care. It's real to me. Genesis 4 verse 1 says, "And Adam knew Eve, his wife, And she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Eternal, unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. It tells you a little bit of something about his offering, doesn't it? And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and his offering he had not respect, and Cain was very much wroth, and his countenance fell. The Lord said unto Cain, why are you wroth, and why has your countenance fallen? And this is the verse of sincerity and truth to me. If you do well, shall you not be accepted? But if you do not well, sin lies at the door. And unto you shall be his desire. Sin is at your door, and it desires you. If you don't do well, then sin is at your door, and its desire is for you. But you must rule over it. You must. What was it the turtle man used to say? That's live action right there. That's live action. Intense is what it is. Take a step back, Cain, and evaluate. What's wrong? Why is your countenance falling? Now, obviously, Cain didn't heed, because if you continue to read that, verse 8, and Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. Now, I won't accuse anyone. I'm not talking about murder. I won't accuse anyone, but I will testify. Sometimes my countenance falls. Sometimes that is physical, sometimes it is spiritual, and sometimes it's both. And in those times, it pays to remember this encounter, because some of the translations I was reading this morning, it says, Yahweh came to Cain and asked these. That's, wow. So it does pay to remember the encounter between God and human. Sincerity and truth. Don't kid yourself. What was it Christ said to the adversary? Mankind does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Now, talk about a healthy diet. Doesn't matter if it's fruit, vegetables, nuts, meat. Man does not live, or women, mankind does not live by bread alone. When Jesus was tempting him, this was his reply. Yeah, that's a healthy diet. It's real. It's real. These days are real. Their meaning is real. But, brethren, it's not all dire and scary. There's so much brightness, too. I want to turn over to John, the Gospel according to John, chapter 6. Maybe the last passage for today. And you may have read some of that this week leading up to Passover or since Passover. May read it in the days to come. But in John chapter 6, I'm going to go down to verse 32. Or actually verse 31, where it says, Our fathers did eat manna in the desert, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat. And again we have Jesus' reply, verse 32. He said to them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he which comes down from heaven and gives life unto the world. Then said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. Jesus said to them, I am bread of life. He that comes to me, what I say earlier, even in the prayer, it's available to everybody. He that comes to me shall never hunger, and he that believes on me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you also have seen me and believe not. All that the Father gives me shall come to me, and him that comes to me I will in no wise cast out. So if I get it, you can have it. For I came down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. And this is the Father's will which hath sent me, that all which he has given me I should lose nothing. There's some more sincerity and truth for these days, but should raise it up again at the last day. And this is the will of him that sent me, that everyone which sees the Son and believes on him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. The Jews then murmured at him because he said, I am the bread which came down from heaven. And they said, Is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he says, I come down from heaven? We know his mom and dad. He didn't come from heaven. He came from the same place the rest of us did, right? Jesus therefore answered and said unto them, Don't murmur amongst yourself. Again, Christ, not his attitude. Murmur not among yourselves. No man can come to me except the Father which hath sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall be all taught of God. Every man therefore that hath heard and hath learned of the Father comes to me. Not that any man hath seen the Father, save he which is of God. He hath seen the Father. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believes on me hath everlasting life. Why? Again, I am that bread of life. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. There goes that balanced diet. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh. We went through that the other night. Which I will give for the life of the world. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. So, brethren, I can say to you, in pretty good conscience, don't forsake your vegetables. Eat your vegetables. Live as long and healthy as you can. But for the ultimate in long longevity, in eternity, in fact, don't forsake the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Calibrate, realign, but celebrate, brethren, always celebrate. We will have some offering and special music, I think, before we have Mr. Freeman.